that conversation with Annette is making HR matter, influencing the boardroom. So I'd please like to welcome to the stage Premo Ojokojo, the Chief People Officer at Azure Finance. Whatever chair you want, Premo. Guy Novik, the CEO of US Air Tours. Perry Hamilton, a football player from Norwich. No. The head of HR and EDI at Norwich City Football Club. And Chelsea Coates, the Chief People Officer at GWI. And moderating this panel, which I'm sure will be very insightful, is our very own Bobby Sandhu, who is a Senior Relationship Manager here at Lattice.
Right. Can everyone hear me? Yeah? Okay, amazing. Firstly, my name is Bobby Sandhu. I am one of the Senior Relationship Managers here at Lattice. And firstly, I want to start by saying thank you for attending today. Attending Lattiverse is a really good opportunity for us to talk about the topics that are impacting HR the most on a day-to-day basis. And today what we're going to be speaking about is around making HR matter, so influencing the boardroom. And the reason I say that is a staggering kind of stat that I saw is that only 2% of all the FTSE 250 companies have a member of the a CPO or a HR director in the board or on the board, compared to 99% of these organizations with a finance director or a CFO sitting on the board. So to Annette's point when she said around the people strategy being about having people at the core of that, there is not really much advocacy for the people team when there is no one representing that. And I think one stage where it goes further is we want to give HR teams the ability to demonstrate the strategic potential for their teams in terms of how they drive impact on a day-to-day basis. So today we have here four wonderful individuals who are clients of Lattice, who are going to be giving us their insights into how we can move that needle and essentially try and drive that to ensure that we're advocating for all of yourselves. So with that in turn, I will allow each of you to introduce yourself.
Shall I kick off?
Yeah.
Hi everyone, and thanks Bobby for having us up here today. We're huge fans of Lattice at GWI. I've got a few team members here today. So I'm Chelsea. I work for a company called GWI. If you haven't heard of us, don't worry, not many people have. We're a B2B brand. So we don't sell to the consumer, we sell to businesses from a 3-person agency right up to Google and Apple, and we help them understand what their consumers think, feel and do.
Thank you.
Hello, so I'm Perry Hamilton. I'm Head of HR and EDI for Norwich City Football Club. We're a professional football club based in the east of England, currently playing in the EFL Championship, which is the second tier of professional football in England.
Hi, good afternoon everyone. My name's Guy Novik. I founded and run a company called US Air Tours, which is a tour operator specialising in sending people principally to the US, and I'm also a non-executive director for a number of other SME companies. And I was the kind of chief executive that you would have needed to persuade to make investments in HR.
Hi, I'm Premo Ojokojo. Recently became the Chief People Officer for Azure Finance, used to be head, so I've seen it from this end and that end. I've been a Lattice user, and I'm proud to say for going on almost 5 years now. So I'm a guinea pig, thank you. Azure Finance is situated in about 7 locations, but with staff in various other places. So having a tool like Lattice helps a lot to do what we do. We provide cross-border payments for businesses across Africa and a lot of other EMEA locations.
A round of applause, guys. Thank you. Okay, so let's get started. The first bit I want to kind of go through is we often see, especially historically, that HR teams have been seen as operational executors, focusing on the smaller or shorter term day-to-day reactive asks, which we all know isn't true. So the first question is, how do you feel that HR leaders can really position themselves as strategic partners rather than an operational executor?
Just to try that out. Okay, so like I said, I recently became CPO, so I can speak from the head of HR side. As head of HR, it was in order to switch from operational. Like when I joined ASA HR was only seen as operational. We were always the admin guys. I've done HR for 25 years, so we came from being personnel managers to now being called fancy names like people, workplace, it's now fancy. But what I've always tried to do, and I'm going to borrow a bit from what Annette has said, was first understand the business. If we understand the business, you then know how to tailor your people's strategy and then start thinking differently. Because I have a lot of engineering team members, because we have to do software development constantly, one of the first things I needed to do was understand what the pain points for those guys were, and then develop areas, come up with strategy that would help keep their people. Now, when I joined, we had an attrition rate of almost 50%. As at half year 2024, my report to the board showed that we were at an attrition rate of 2.5%. Now, it didn't come from anything other than staying consistent with the people strategy that I had set out. Some were immediate, some were long-term. I had to look for where we were having the most pain points, where were managers not agreeing to doing stuff. See, when let's take, for example, performance management. When we then have to do reviews, that is where managers hate. And I'm talking from an HR, they do not want to be a part of it. However, I had to find a tool that then worked for us. Lattice, I'm going to keep selling. You guys have to start paying me. I did a lot of research, and at that time, Lattice was just about to roll out in this part of the world. So I'm like, you know what, let me try it. And I looked at it. What drove it for me was, what did people want to see? The questions from my reviews or from the people surveys that we do, well, we want to know where the business is going, because the people want to know. Where's the business going? What are we doing? What does my future look like? What is the growth potential? If you can communicate that to the people strategically, they would either stay, and then when the board sees that kind of information and how you're using that data to then create things better, it makes it easier. So one thing Lattice does for us especially is when it comes to our goals. Now, I can see where the company is, how my department contributes to it, how I contribute to it. So it's a holistic, everyone can see it in one place. And then that then ties to my day-to-day feedback, my one-to-ones, conversations are happening constantly. Now, when that happens and you can track that, because the tracking is also important. When you can then track that, it then feeds back into the data and the information that you're sharing, either with the board or otherwise. And one key thing I kept hearing Annette saying is, find your right stakeholders. That was the first thing I did. I found out who were the people I needed to interact with. My immediate boss at that time was the wrong person, because as much as I was reporting to her, she was a COO. She only knew operations. She didn't know people. So I found out that my CFO was key. My chief risk officer was key. My CTO was key. So I started working on those divisions. By the time I got them up to scratch, it then became easier to sell it to everyone else and then get everything in place. Hope that helps.
That was wonderful. Thank you. Great. So the next question is, how can HR ensure, so as Premo mentioned around these initiatives that she's been working on with the team, with these initiatives, how can HR ensure that the initiatives are aligned with the overall objectives of the business?
Yeah, I mean, I'll give that one a go. We don't want to be strategic. We don't want to be operational, we want to be strategic, okay? But you have to understand the business at an operational level, okay? So that means doing the job. That means going out and understanding the work. HR people professionals in the room, along with probably finance and IT, are the parts of the organisation that touch every part of the organisation. There's people over here who have never interacted with people over here, but we do. So we're the bridge, okay? So we understand the work, and when we understand the work, then we are the voice in the room that says, that's a fantastic idea, but have you considered how it's going to impact over there? And when you start to make a sensible connection that people can identify, you start adding value. And as soon as you start adding value, you start getting listened to.
Amazing. Any other thoughts from yourselves?
Yeah, I think there's something about, really operational people teams produce data, but strategic people teams produce insight. And I know that sounds like semantics, but if you think about what you really need to be an effective people team, it's not just anymore good enough just to get the data and put it in front of people. You need to be able to tell a story with that data and help them understand the impact of it. And Lattice is, I'm going to be on the sales pitch too now, people. Lattice is a brilliant tool actually for gathering that data and pulling it all into one place. So previously you would have engagement data over here and performance data over there and D&I data over here and have to kind of cobble it all together on a spreadsheet and try and tell a story. And so the elevation or this big jump that we've done in the people side over the last 10 years from a tech perspective is seeing that all pulled into one place, which is brilliant. But we have to remember that the stakeholders that we're working with, their goals, their objectives, they're not looking at this data day to day like we are. They're not living and breathing it. So when we sit with them, it's about taking that data, bringing it to life with insight and telling stories and helping them understand why it matters.
And I guess, have you found that process of using the data to tell a story that you're pulling from Lattice? How have you found that process of using that data in Lattice?
I mean, I sort of geek out a bit on Lattice with my leaders. I work for a research company. You can't put anything in front of them if they can't qualify it themselves. And I have a team of data scientists who will challenge me on any HR tool I put in front of them. And Lattice is the first one that's held up so far, which has been very helpful. But I think, really, if you can prove the validity of the data, right? So it's not pulling through in different ways because it's from different tools and different systems. That builds on the credibility of what you're saying, and then your conversation isn't about, can I trust this attrition or churn number? The conversation is much more about, what does that churn number mean and what are we doing about it?
Yeah, absolutely. Firstly, thank you. So the next question is around driving cultural change. So Lattice ran a people strategy report this year from last year's data, and we interviewed over 1,000 different HR professionals. One of the things that we found is that 74% of the respondents felt that the whole premise of morale and productivity was obviously impacted by layoffs. So many organizations now have been impacted by layoff recovery, meaning that so many of them find that it takes between 4 to 12 months to really drive productivity and morale, versus the expectation of C-suite who want that to be done within 3 months. So you can obviously see that big disparity there between really how long it takes. So with that in mind, what role do you think that the HR team have in driving that cultural change to ultimately support that long-term organization success?
Sure, I'll take that one. I think for me, my sort of Damascene conversion was when I moved from looking at HR as a structural necessity to being persuaded and now fully buy into HR moving from a cost centre to being a profit centre. And that was a dramatic change because everyone on a board is looking to see how quickly they can get a return on investment. However, if someone was going and making an argument for CapEx investment, they're not going to get a return on that in 3 months' time. So when people are presenting to me in terms of shall we invest this into our profit centre from an HR perspective, they get my attention if they split it into short, medium and long term. What can they deliver to me within the next 6 months? What can they deliver to me within a year? I'm probably not much interested in much beyond 18 months. Things are changing too quickly. I'm in an SME environment, things are on the move. If I was in a bigger organisation, I could be stretched to 2 years, 2.5 years. But crucially, I think the most important lesson I learned was being persuaded that everything that you represent in this room represents an opportunity. So see yourselves as a profit centre, not as a cost centre, and therefore all the same arguments that you're making about investment are the same arguments that the head of sales is making, the head of operations is making, the head of productivity is making. And as Annette was going through her slides, I was nodding away thinking, yep, that happened to me, yep, that happened to me. And one of the things I think you'll also notice, apart from a very impressive CV from an HR perspective, is I'm absolutely convinced if she wasn't successful in HR, she'd be really good in sales. And so have you. You have to be really good in sales. You've got to be able to capture the attention of preferably at least one major sponsor on the board with whatever it is they need to get excited. I can probably stand more than 7 slides, but probably not more than a dozen. But something that Annette said also was really important. If my attention's been caught, then I'm going to dig into what's supporting all this. So you can't go in and wing it. If you were going to go in and sell this thing, you have got to have done your research, and that research needs to have come from credible places. And also link back in was where, do I feel comfortable where the research has come from? If that research says Harvard Business Review, I'm probably going to be more comfortable about accepting what it has to say than something more general. That's aligned with bringing in an expert to make the board feel comfortable, even though you were probably at least as sharp as the expert. But the board is looking for a little security, so if you're going to bring in information that supports your case, bring it in from a place where they feel comfortable and credible. But for me, just sell yourselves as a profit centre, not a cost centre.
Thank you. Perry, I'd be keen to get your thoughts around this, because I know obviously your workforce is a little bit different, and so it'll be good to understand how you have kind of managed that process internally.
Yeah. So one of the big things in football, very specifically to football, and I mean it works across the board as well, is what are other people doing in this space? And if you can talk about benchmarking other organizations, and especially best practice and what good looks like, look, one of the things that a lot of people don't realize about working in football is we are really only competitive on the pitch. Okay, so outside of that, I have a fantastic network with a load of EDI, DEI specialists who I'm talking to all the time. If someone's saying, look, we're doing this, fantastic, can you give me the template for that? Yeah, of course I can. They're not looking at being in a competitive edge because inclusion benefits everyone, okay? So when you're talking about that, you're talking about best practice in human resource and people management. There's such a diverse way of doing things because no 2 football clubs are structured the same. So you talk about SMEs, you talk about other size organizations, you're likely going to see a board. That board is going to have very specific roles. They're going to have your middle management and what have you. Structure goes out of the window when you're talking about unique working environments like football. So it's about understanding best practice and being able to demonstrate not just that this is best practice, but this is what it's helped them to do. I can sit and talk about best practice at Liverpool all I want. But they're top 4 football club in the Premier League. That's not where we are, so they're not a fair comparator. So it's not only understanding best practice in the business, but it's understanding your place in that business and in that region. So, ONS data massively helps with that as well, because part of being a football club is reflecting your community. So understanding what's best practice in our industry, but what would actually reasonably work where we are. Start linking it back to who we are. That's our identity. Identity becomes culture because it's how we do things, and we do things those way because that's who we are, so if that makes sense. So when you know what the change is, you know what you want to make as a change, then the things that you need to lean into with that, for me, when it's coming to driving cultural change, it's consistency, it's transparency, and it's patience. And if you've got those 3 things, this is the message, we stay on message. We are consistent. We're always going to do things like this until this comes in. Obviously, we'll look at the data. We'll make sure that if we need to pivot a little bit, we will. But the approach has been, here's the goal. We're consistent with that goal, and we're consistent in how we apply it. Transparency is, we do it this way because I've done this specifically this way, and I'm really open about that. Ask me questions about it. I want you to know what we're doing. That transparency also helps with engagement, because if you're open about it, there's no, well, we say one thing for one person and another thing for another. That double standard, that drives disengagement, drop of a hat, right? So if you're really open about it, you're really transparent about it, and you make that consistency really visible, just takes some time. And that's the patience piece. And I don't know about anyone else in the room, but football, season by season, you don't know where you're going to be, you don't know what workforce you're going to have, because things can change so quickly, the difference between Premier League, Championship, League One, etc. So asking a board or a CEO of a football team to have patience and look long term can be really difficult, but with the right data, with the right approach to cultural change, with the right people on board, understanding your place in the community and your identity, then you start to get traction, and it becomes a bit of a flywheel, because the more traction you get, the more results you see, and more people start to think, I'm switched on to this, this worked last time, let's do it again.
Yeah.
Help?
Yeah, I really like that. So I think the next part is really around building relationships with the board. So this is all great, right? Like understanding like what the issues are, like, but also like what we need to do. So some of the work that we did as a business with some of the reporting that we've done, we found that high-performing HR teams, so teams that are excelling on their HR and people team goals, have directly closer and better relationships with the board and C-level, with over 80% finding that their work contributes to better business outcomes. We know that when you're doing that and you're driving business outcomes, HR teams get increased spend for better tools, automation, more time to focus on driving the bottom line with other objectives within the people team. So my next question is, like, what advice would you give to HR leaders to really strengthen the relationship that the people team and HR teams have with the board?
I can try that. So first of all, I had said earlier about finding people in the board or on the board that can help you drive your goals or drive your strategy. Once you have those people cornered, it then becomes easier to, sorry, once you have those people on your side, it then becomes easier to pass to pass on everything else that you want to do. Now, truthfully, you when you're coming at the board with anything, you have to make sure that you're showing them where the spend is and where the investment is and what the returns are. Your ROI is absolutely important. I'll give you a small example. I wanted to switch my payroll tool. Now, I really wish Lattice had payroll. Come on. Okay, so so I wanted to switch my payroll tool, and in order to do that, I needed to calculate for the board how much time and costs it was now for me to get there. Now, and I showed the savings that was going to come from it, and then where I can use those savings anyway. However, in order to get that out there, I have my person on the board. Linda is an amazing person. If I just chat to Linda and I'm like, Linda, can I pick your brain on this? It's easy. Once I get Linda in, once I get the CFO in, my CEO just says yes. I've gotten to the point, I've reached that point in the respect and the quality of work that comes out. Now, Perry kept saying being consistent with what you do. When you consistently show results based on the strategy you've put out, you will be trusted easily, much easier than before. So you have to keep being consistent with what you do. Keep showing your numbers. Keep showing, how the program is working. Now, if there's anything I take to my CEO, Elizabeth doesn't even think about it. She's like, go ahead. Some things I even do as long as it's in my budget, and I'm like, I did this just to let you know I spent $10,000 or I spent $300,000 to restructure this. It's okay. As long as it's in the budget, it's in there, you can get it done. So as long as you're thinking your numbers, you see the returns it brings to you, being able to then constantly align with the members of the board, and then your C-suites then becomes easier to get what it is you want to get done. Yeah.
It sounds like that hasn't been something you've done overnight, though.
No. It hasn't. For me, I've got to this point. Honestly, I think about a year and a half ago, and I have worked in organizations where I literally just walked out of the place because the CEO himself or even the board is not interested in the people program. I'm lucky enough to work for a company where it's people first. Bringing your best selves to work is what we talk about. It's not just a speech. It's an action. It's a constant thing. What is it that we can do to do? What makes it flexible? not to digress so much because we're running out of time, I'll take, for example, my engineers. My engineers needed to work first, remote first. So all my engineers are remote first because that's what works best for that team. Not the same thing for some other teams, but for my engineers, it's that. My trading desk says, we want to run shifts. What works best for the trading desk? That can't work for my operations team. That can't work for my people team. That can't work for my finance team. So you have to see what works best for each team, then tailor it. And then when it brings out the best results at the end of the day, so when you're doing your reports, I do a board report. Used to be quarterly, I changed it to half a year. So every 6 months when I give out my report, it shows with clear data how things have improved, how my teams have become high-performing, how our reviews are looking good, where we've come from, because I've also set the goals for the entire last 3 years of where we're going with changes along the line. So if you're consistent with what you do, you get trusted, and then anything you bring before the team makes it easier for you to push through.
I love that. Chelsea.
I'd love to give a brilliant.
That was a great mic drop.
That was a brilliant answer. I want to talk about the experience when you're in like a VC or private equity-based backed company. And I think there's a few things you can do before you even go in front of the board. So, as a C-suite, we report into the board, but we see them once per quarter. And they're the ones who sign off on budgets, all that great work that we do. And if you think about the composition of your board, usually, if you've been through Series A, Series B, etc. funding, you'll have members of that board who are invested in how you perform for the next quarter. And then you'll also have non-exec directors like the brilliant Annette that we had earlier, who, she's not an investor necessarily, but would be overseeing and still approving and might have more of a 5 to 10 year view and has come from business and has a completely different perspective. So when you're going into the room, it's important to think about actually who's in the room and not doing a one-size-fits-all presentation. And yes, there's the sort of individual consultation you can do before you get in front of the board, but it's about thinking, okay, I know that person's going to care about the numbers, that person's going to care about the impact in 5 years, and really thinking about how you can tailor to that audience before you get in the room. And keeping in mind, if you go in front of the board once per quarter, make it impactful. And really, it's not just about the content that you're putting in front of them. That's important. I don't know if you find this, but no matter what you put in that board pack, they'll always pick the one number that you're not prepared to talk on. But it's about actually really spending time thinking about how you present. Think about being impactful, because if you've got a non-exec director who sits on the board of 50 different companies, they may have heard something really similar 50 times, and you've got to be impactful and really influence. So it's not just about the data, but it's about the way you really influence the board as well.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
We're done.
And that's it.